Welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm going straight to the point because I know many of you are grinding warrior and struggling to figure out which inscriptions you should choose. After spending a long time testing them in actual combat and comparing every stat one by one, I've put together a complete inscription tier list for warrior. I'll go from the worst options all the way to the absolute best, so you can watch along and find out whether your current setup made it into the top tiers. Before we get into the ranking, I want to quickly explain how I evaluated these inscriptions, so you understand why I ranked them this way rather than thinking I'm just making random choices. For a tank class like warrior, the most important factor is DMG RED, meaning the percentage of incoming damage reduction, along with uptime, which is how long the buff remains active compared to its total cooldown. An inscription with high DMG RED but an extremely long cooldown can end up having very low uptime in actual combat, making it less worthwhile. Another important factor is initial cooldown, meaning the delay before the inscription becomes available when you first enter combat. This is especially important for warrior because if you don't have your defensive buffs at the beginning of the fight, you'll be soft as a noodle and can easily get burst down within the first few seconds. Now that you understand these three factors, let's get into the ranking. First up is Tier D. The Tier 1 like to call avoid these stat traps at all costs. These are the inscriptions that look good at first glance, but once you actually equip them, you'll probably regret it. At the top of this list is Final Tactic. This inscription increases the initial cooldown of your core inscription by 100%, meaning you have to wait a full 60 seconds before getting your first core effect. And what do you get in return? Only 1.77% DMG RED. Honestly, that's a terrible trade-off. I tested it myself, and it basically felt like I was intentionally making the first half of the fight harder for no good reason. Next is Ambush Tactic, which increases the core initial cooldown by 50%. That penalty is still far too heavy compared to what you get in return. Then we have Guardian Valor. This one only has a 10% chance to activate when you take damage, while its hidden cooldown is as long as 40 seconds. That makes it far too RNG dependent for a class that needs consistent defensive uptime like a tank. Phalanx Glory has a similar problem. It only has a 10% activation chance and provides just 4.49% DMG RED, which simply isn't worth relying on. And finally, we have the trio of Standby Tactic, Ready Tactic, and Combat Cry. All three share the same problem. They increase your initial cooldown, ranging from an additional 5 seconds to 30% or 10%, just to give you a tiny amount of passive damage reduction. Overall, I'd strongly recommend skipping this entire tier. Don't waste your upgrade resources on these unless you absolutely have no other options. Next is Tier C, the group I'd call usable for now, but low impact. These aren't as terrible as Tier D, but honestly, you probably won't notice much of a difference when using them. Barrier Valor has a 25% activation chance for 19.35% DMG RED, which sounds pretty good at first. But its hidden cooldown is a full 30 seconds, so you have very little control over when the buff actually appears. You simply can't reliably plan around it. Adversity Glory has the same problem. It gives you a 25% chance to gain 4.85% DMG RED for 10 seconds, but the number is simply too small to make a meaningful difference during combat. Fortress Glory activates 4.76% DMG RED for 9 seconds, but with a 27-second cooldown, the uptime is simply too low to rely on. Iron Rider Glory provides 4% DMG RED for 9 seconds with a 21-second cooldown, putting it in the lower middle range without anything particularly impressive. And then we have Stalwart Glory, which gives you 5.48% DMG RED when activated, but once it enters cooldown, you actually suffer a 0.7% DMG RED reduction. That downside reduces its overall value quite a bit. So if you don't have anything better, the Tier C options are fine as temporary gear, but I wouldn't recommend investing too many resources into them. Now we get to Tier B, the group I describe as solid and reliable. These are inscriptions that provide good defensive stats, but they're held back by slightly long cooldowns or minor drawbacks. Chosen Valor gives 19.99% DMG RED for 18 seconds. And what I really like about this inscription is that it doesn't reduce your stats during its cooldown. It's a very stable mid-tier core inscription and a good choice for players who are still building their team. Imperial Valor provides a massive amount of DMG RED, reaching 30.75% for 20 seconds. Sounds extremely attractive, right? The problem is that it has a 60-second cooldown, and during that cooldown, you also suffer a 5.4% DMG RED penalty. So even though the peak defensive stat is incredible, its actual uptime isn't as good as some other inscriptions. That's why I'm keeping it in Tier B rather than moving it up to Tier A. Shield Glory and Champion Glory are the support options here, providing a solid amount of activated DMG RED ranging from 4.72% to 6.889%. They work well as additional defensive support alongside your main core inscription. And finally, we have Immortal and Advanced Tactic. These two reduce initial cooldown by anywhere from 5 seconds to 10%, allowing you to activate your defensive skills slightly earlier when entering combat. They're especially useful for compensating for core inscriptions that have longer initial cooldowns. Now we're moving up to Tier A, and this is the group I strongly recommend using if you have access to these inscriptions. The common theme here is extremely high effect duration, allowing Warrior to maintain strong defensive coverage for a large portion of the fight. First up is Starfire Valor, which provides 25.82% DMG RED for 18 seconds. That's a huge amount of damage reduction, allowing Warrior to stay in the middle of the fight and pressure the enemy team much more effectively. I tested it myself, and the difference in survivability was very noticeable. Fortified Valor has an even longer duration, lasting 24 seconds on a 36-second cooldown. That means you have defensive coverage for roughly 40% of the total combat time, which is very impressive for a core inscription. Then we have the trio of Resolute Glory, Rock Glory, and Iron Wall Glory. These support inscriptions have extremely long durations, ranging from 12 to 15 seconds, combined with relatively short cooldowns of only 15 to 18 seconds. That gives them roughly 40 to 50% defensive uptime, making them extremely effective if you're trying to build a consistently tanky warrior. Swift Tactic reduces the initial cooldown of core inscriptions by 30%, while also reducing incoming damage by 1.28%. This makes it a very good pairing for core inscriptions with long initial delays. And finally, we have Tenacity Glory, which provides a straight 1.48% permanent DMG RED. That means 100% uptime, no activation requirement, and no cooldown at all. It's incredibly reliable and makes an excellent defensive foundation for your build. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for, Tier S, the most powerful inscriptions, the true staples for Warrior. These are the top 3 inscriptions that, in my opinion, you absolutely want if you're trying to build the strongest warrior possible, because they solve 2 of the class's biggest problems: slow combat startup and inconsistent defensive uptime. At the top of the list is Steelbone Valor, a core inscription. Its effect is extremely simple, but incredibly powerful. It gives you a straight 6.98% permanent DMG RED. The reason I put it in Tier S is because you don't have to wait through a 30-second initial cooldown like with other inscriptions. The effect never disappears, and there are absolutely no drawbacks. In other words, you're stronger from the very first second of the fight. That's something no other inscription on this list can provide. Second is Rush Tactic, an extremely strategic support inscription. It reduces incoming damage by 1.19%, while also reducing the initial cooldown of your core inscription by 50%. The reason I rate this one so highly is because it cuts the core activation wait from 30 seconds down to just 15 seconds. That basically means your warrior can enter its tanky state twice as fast, giving you a huge advantage during early game engagements. And finally, in third place for Tier S, we have Steady Valor, another core inscription that provides 22.9% DMG RED for 15 seconds, with a cooldown of only 30 seconds. This is the core inscription with the shortest cooldown cycle across the entire list I tested, and if you combine it with Rush Tactic from above, you can access that 22.9% DMG RED extremely quickly and rotate it consistently throughout the fight, leaving your opponent with almost no defensive gaps to exploit. So, to sum everything up, if you're wondering which direction you should build your warrior, my recommendation is to prioritize Steelbone Valor as the foundation of your permanent defensive setup, Combine it with Steady Valor for fast and consistent DMG RED rotations, and then add Rush Tactic to reduce your initial cooldown at the start of the fight. This is the combination I feel is the most optimal for a warrior that wants consistent survivability throughout the entire fight, without having to worry about being vulnerable during the early stages. If you prefer to maximize damage reduction for a short period of time to survive intense combat situations, you can also consider adding Starfire Valor or Imperial Valor, depending on whether you're willing to accept their longer cooldowns. And that's my complete analysis and evaluation of the Warrior T2 Inscription Tier List in WoW Adventure. Does this ranking match the inscriptions you're currently using, or do you have a different opinion? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to support me in making more build analysis videos for other classes in the game. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end, and I'll see you in the next video.